Welcome to From the Editor with Larry Gordon, where newsmakers unpack the stories shaping the Jewish community.
Hi, everyone. It's Larry Gordon and Esta Gordon. This is Between the Lines. And our very special guest today is a man who I guess if you're, I wouldn't know, I guess if you're over 50 years old, you know who he is, or maybe a little bit less. I'm not sure. We're going to explore that. But I don't know Alex Sternberg personally or so well. I just see him here and there, usually in the supermarket, back in the Five Towns, or even down here a couple of times. But I always tell Alex from the first time I met him down here in Florida that he was like a mystery man to me. Because when I was in yeshiva, and Alex knows the story I'm going to tell. When I was in yeshiva, we used to get out at 12 o'clock on Fridays. And some boys would get up at 11:30 or 20 to 12 and leave class. And the Rebbe would stop them and say, "Where are you going?" And the answer was, "Alex Sternberg, Rebbe." And then you could leave. I didn't understand. What is the magic formula that allows you to leave yeshiva a half hour earlier if you say the words Alex Sternberg? I was almost afraid to say it. I don't know what you were obligating yourself to do. But I learned later on, Alex, you could explain a little bit to me. I learned later on that amongst your many accomplishments in life, you are a karate champion, a karate expert, and you were teaching yeshiva guys karate, right? And we're talking about 55 years ago, okay? So we were both young men then. I was just like, 55 years ago, I was like 10 years younger than I am now. But, but other than that, what was going on that how did you arrange for people to be able to leave yeshiva early when they said the words Alex Sternberg? What was going on?
Well, in 1967, I was going to Yeshiva Torah Vodaas, which was still in Williamsburg.
Okay.
And around that time, I arranged with the Williamsburg Y, to teach a karate class on Friday afternoons for yeshiva kids. And I finally got permission. It took a while. I finally got permission. And I started a class there. I believe it was at 12:30, and it went until 2 o'clock.
Okay.
At 2 o'clock, everybody disappeared, and there were a lot of kids in the dormitory of the yeshiva, and everybody went home for Shabbos. I used to hitch on the corner of Bedford Avenue and the BQE. I used to go on the corner, I used to stick my hand out, and
Yeah.
there were a lot of people that used to drive to Borough Park. So
Yeah.
I lived in Borough Park, so I used to get a ride to Borough Park. So Friday afternoons was a sacred day because it was my karate class in the Y. Now, some kids didn't go to school in Williamsburg, and they may have gone to other yeshivas, and in order to get to Williamsburg to be on time, they needed to leave their yeshivas a little bit earlier.
Okay.
Coming late to my classes was a very uncomfortable thing
Okay.
because anyone who came late had
Yeah.
to do 50 push-ups.
Uh-huh.
So the kids tried, you know what, later on years when I opened up karate schools, many of the parents used to say to me when they rushed in, and the class started at 6 and they rushed in at 5 minutes after, and they used to say, "Sensei, it's not his fault. It's my fault. I couldn't get him here on time." And I used to look at the mother and say, "It's not a problem. Then you hit the deck and you do 50 push-ups." So that was my yeshiva class on Fridays was in existence for many years. And I taught hundreds and hundreds of kids in the class. Some of them became brown belts or black belts. I had kids that became Rabbeim from Chofetz Chaim. I had a whole group of kids from Chofetz Chaim that went into the kollel. So this was a very, very popular class, and it was a class that I enjoyed teaching very much.
So what was I know I read that you came here as a kid from Hungary, right? You were about 10 or 11 years old, right?
Right.
And so you weren't an expert in karate at that age. What
No.
happened? What happened after you got to New York that motivated you in that direction?
Well, number one, growing up in Hungary in the 50s, you might find this hard to believe, but there was a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism.
Right.
You know, can you imagine that Hungarian Christians didn't like Jews as much as we would have liked them to like us? And I got into a lot of fights when I was a young kid in Hungary. Kids called me in Hungarian a dirty Jew. And my mother, when I told her one time that one of the kids called me a dirty Jew, my mother, who I have to tell you, was a very refined lady. She went to college in 1930 in Hungary. She read poetry in Latin and Greek because that was the languages they taught. And she said to me when I told her that somebody called me a dirty Jew, she said, "Don't ever let anybody call you a dirty Jew." What should I do? I asked her. She said, "Next time they call you a dirty Jew, smack him across the mouth." So as it happened, it didn't take long for somebody to call me a dirty Jew, and I smacked him.
Yeah.
Anyway, I grew up in Hungary, and then I was in Vienna for almost a year. And in Vienna, it was also the same thing. The kids found out on the second day of school that I was a Jew, because on the first day, everybody got on their knees and began to pray. Austria has certainly no separation of church and state in schools, and it's a Catholic country. So the kids every morning were obligated to get on their knees. There was a crucifix on the wall. There was a Jesus statue hanging off the crucifix, and everybody put their hands together and they prayed. Of course, I was 10 years old, but I knew what was going on, and I didn't pray. So the next day when my father came up to tell the school, "Don't make my son pray. We pray our own way," excuse him from the Catholic prayer. So the principal said, "No problem." He explained it to the teacher. The teacher said, "No problem." He explained it to the rest of the kids in the class. And from that day on, for months, every single day, when we left the school, the kids lined up on the sidewalk in front of the school building and began to yell at me and yell at me and yell at me, "Schmutzige Jude, schmutzige Jude, schmutzige Jude." They were
Wow.
all 10 years old. And what I did is anyone who I could grab a hold with my hands, I punched them. As
Yeah.
you can imagine, I got into a lot of problems. Of
Yeah.
course, I didn't make any friends in Vienna. And so when I came to America, I went to the Y because Torvidas had no physical
On
education. There was no,
49th Street and 14th Avenue
No, he's in
no,
in Borough
Williamsburg.
Park.
no, no, no. That was the Borough
Williamsburg.
Park
He was in
way.
Oh,
I,
Williamsburg.
you went to
I went to the
Williamsburg.
Williamsburg on Bedford Avenue,
Uh-huh.
right off the BQE. And I I have to admit, I hope that none of my rebbeim are listening because I don't want to get into trouble now, 60 years later. But I used to cut classes Thursday night in the dormitory. We had a dormitory shir. I used to cut the class. I used to go to the Y, and I used to work out. I used to play ball. And there was a karate class that got started. And so I joined the karate class and I began to train. And as time passed, I got more and more seriously involved. And ultimately, in '66, I switched to a very professional school where training was like 5, 6 days a week, 3 hours each. So, and that was where I trained for most of the my career. And I have to tell you that the school that I switched to was in Brownsville, Brooklyn. If you know the neighborhood,
Rough
if anyone did,
neighborhood.
the neighborhood was
Brownsville.
such,
Yeah.
Brownsville, that I don't think there was another white person there for 10 miles in any direction. And it just so happened that I came upon this karate school, and um, they saw me with a karate uniform under my arm, and they challenged me to come in and show what I know. And I had a lot more, how should I say, uh, cojones than I had seichel. So I went into the school and I said, "Okay, I'll show you what I know." And unfortunately, I found out that I knew very little. This school was real tough, and the kids in the school were very, very, very. They grew up in that neighborhood. They went to a particular public school that was called Boys High, where if you weren't careful and if you didn't have a group of friends with you, other people would jump you, take not only your shoes but take your pants, and
Hmm.
you would go back into the class barefooted, underwear, hopefully. And it was a very rough school. So these kids, they all were tough. So I learned to be very tough from training with them and exchanging, and fighting them. I learned to be very tough.
So you must have
That
been
was
you must have been a very strong guy. I mean, you didn't just learn the nuances of karate. Did you work up? Did you lift weights or
No, I never. I
something?
lifted weights much, much later, but no, I was just I was physically fit. in Hungary growing up, I ice skated in the winter. I actually went to school on ice skates because the streets used to freeze for months. And I swam in rivers nearby. We didn't have swimming pools per se, and we certainly didn't have any ice skating rink. So we waited for the rivers or the nearby lakes to freeze over, and then we threw a rock toward the middle of the lake to make sure that it was strong enough to handle our weight so it didn't collapse and we didn't fall in. Anyway, I was very physically active growing up. We had a very nice outdoorsy type of a life. I lived in a very small
Alex, were
city.
you an only child?
No, I was I have an older brother who was 3 years older than me, but
Hmm.
my brother and I grew up in very different directions.
Situations.
He was not. The situation was the same, but my brother wasn't interested in sports. My brother was interested later on in college. He was interested in chess. He was interested in classical music. He wasn't. He never played ball. As far as he never played ball. So I was, on the other hand, I was very athletic. So I never lifted weights. I was not any stronger than any other kid who was like me, but I certainly had a lot of willpower, and I had a lot of determination, and I wasn't taking no baloney from anybody. And if I
Alex,
got, yeah,
so I grew up in Borough Park when it was just the a few Jews from the Holocaust. It was
right,
Italians and it was Puerto Ricans. And I had
sure.
twin brothers, my older brothers. One was very geschickt. He was a real street fighter and he was well known in every yeshiva. To this day, when I tell somebody who my brother was, they look at me and they say there's no way. He was exactly the way you represent yourself. He
The
was a
street fight.
street fighter, and there were times
Yeah.
that people they would attack his twin brother, and he took matters in his own hands always. At one time, he really took matters to the point that we didn't know what happened to the person he beat up, and then he had the nerve to go to the police because we brought up in 14th and 43rd. That was a scary place, and he told the police, "Now you make sure you follow me home if you don't want anybody else get beaten up."
Okay, so I went to a yeshiva when I came to America in 1961. I went to a yeshiva around the corner from where you grew up, Torres Emes.
Taras Emes, that's where my brothers went.
Of
Well
course, and,
known.
And Rabbi Wolf. Rabbi Wolf
Rabbi
was
Wolf,
the
my
principal.
The mighty
parents
wolf.
saw him every
Mighty wolf.
day.
Well, thank God I didn't see him every day, because seeing him every day was not a happy
He
thing. It
was
was not.
very strong.
He used to rip telephone books,
That's
and
right.
I saw him bend pennies with his hands, with his fingers, and I
Yep,
saw him unbend the pennies. Rabbi
I
Wolf was a
know.
legend. Yeah, he was a
Rabbi
legend.
Schwartz was the principal.
Correct. And Dr. Mendel was the
Dr.
English
Mandel.
principal. Right, that's right. It was a great
Wait.
yeshiva for a lot of immigrant kids. There were
Right.
lots of immigrant kids there.
That's right.
Right.
You have so much in common. I remember Rabbi Wolf. He was known as the Mighty Wolf. I
The
think I
Yeah.
Mighty
was
Wolf.
in, I think I was when I was in camp with him one summer. Um, Now, Alex, I want to jump around a little bit because you have a great story to tell beyond your karate expertise and beyond solving the mystery of how to get out of yeshiva earlier, which is every kid's dream. I mean, I don't know. Does anything like that exist today in any other yeshiva? Can you say somebody's name and get out of class a half hour
I
earlier?
I can't imagine. I'm sure that the yeshivas now are much more right wing. They're much more strict about certain things.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, we had a lot of kids in the yeshiva when I first went there, and even in Torah Vodaas, that were normal kids. They weren't yeshivish kids. Today, there's a whole new language. It's yeshivish.
Right.
What is my son is yeshivish? Ich weiß, what does that mean? Is yeshivish? But there is a language today. In
yeah.
those days, that wasn't the case. And I don't think anybody, number one, you have to imagine, I got into a lot of trouble in yeshiva for karate. Because I was studying karate and I began to teach karate, I got into a lot of, when we moved to East Ninth Street outside of Borough Park, it was also a very Italian neighborhood there. And a couple of the kids who lived in a dormitory got into a fight with some Italian kids, and one of them broke an aerial antenna off a car, and he slashed the kid, and the aerial antenna lacerated his scalp. Kid needed stitches in the hospital. This was on a Sunday evening. I was no longer in the yeshiva. I was home.
Yeah.
When I came back the next morning and I heard what happened, I mobilized my troops.
Uh-huh.
I had a number of kids that I was training already in the yeshiva, and I said, okay, 11 o'clock, we're going to meet. We're going to go outside. We're going to go to the candy store around the corner where these kids hang out. We're going to kick their butt. The principal in the yeshiva, the mighty Quinn,
Quinn?
Rabbi Quinn was the name of the principal,
Sure.
and he heard about our mobilization. And as we were leaving the yeshiva, he stood by the door, blocking the door, and he said, "Bocharim, if you go out, you're going to be
You're not
thrown out
coming
of the
back.
yeshiva. Yeah, you can't come back." And I thought for a moment, and I said to him, "Rebbe, is it okay for these guys, these chutzim, to beat up the Jewish kids? Is that okay? We're going to take
Yeah.
care of it. It's not going to happen again." So he said, "If you go out, don't come back." So we had like five of us. I think, as I remember, two guys went back, and me and two other guys went out anyway. And we got into a fight with these guys, and we smacked them around. And then
Yeah.
we had the rest of the day off because we couldn't go back into yeshiva.
Yeah. Yeah, I
You
had
know,
that.
but
I was once suspended from yeshiva for jaywalking because,
wow,
on Bedford Avenue, I was jaywalking and I was suspended the entire next day from yeshiva. And then they called my parents the night before and said, you know what? He's only going to be suspended from English studies in the afternoon. He can come in the
right,
morning. That started to get me worried that they're going to change their mind and I won't be suspended from English either. So after the morning classes were over, I made a run for it to get home
right,
to make sure they can't change their mind. So I think we all had different types of
right.
similar
Which which
experiences.
which yeshiva did you go to, Larry?
Well, I went to a few yeshivas. And I was a good student, but the yeshivas kept closing under me. You know,
Aha,
they kept going out of business. This particular jaywalking incident happened when I was in the fifth grade at Lubavitch Yeshiva on Bedford and Dean. You know where that is?
yeah,
Right,
sure,
right
sure.
opposite the statue of Ulysses S. Grant. You know where that is?
Grant, yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And so after that, I went to Yeshiva of Eastern Parkway. Um,
right,
and then I went to Pacific Crown Heights, which closed, which got absorbed by Chaim Berlin. So
right.
it was four schools. I was a good student. I was well behaved. But anyway, this is about you. It's not about me. We'll do a show about me
Alex,
some
was
other
this
time.
before the JDL movement?
Yes, yeah. I got involved with the JDL in 1968 when
So you
Rabbi
you must have
Kahana
been
first started.
you must have been on the Chaya squad.
I was not on the Chaya squad. I was the head of the Chaya squad.
Oh, so you
I
have to explain. I once went. I was very close with Kahana, and I once went to Washington with him on a bus with the Chaya Squad. I don't know if
right.
you were on the bus or not, but I remember we
We
made a rest stop so everybody could go to the bathroom. But the Chaya Squad went out to do a little bit of exercises, so they stayed in shape for when we got to Washington. They did push-ups, and I guess you were there too, probably on that trip to Washington.
we
But
went
definitely.
to Washington and we had a sit down, and several hundred of us were arrested.
That might have
Um,
been
yeah,
the time. I think I stayed on the
right,
bus. Uh,
right.
I think I stayed on the
We
bus most of the time.
we had
But
occasion to go to Washington several times with the JDL. One time we went from Philadelphia to Washington on foot. We had a
wow,
100-mile march to Washington. We drove to Philly, and Philadelphia. We switched to, we got out of the buses and we walked all through the back Pennsylvania countryside. And, we ended up in Washington and we had a very big demonstration in Washington. A lot of people got arrested because we sat down. But we didn't have any problem with the cops. We sat down. When the cops came to arrest us, we got arrested, and that was it. There were other demonstrations later on in New York City in front of the Soviet mission
You
to
right,
right.
the UN.
right.
And over there, the cops that came to arrest us were not normal station house cops. They were members of the Tactical Patrol Force, the
With
Hmm.
their
TPF.
batons. That's
The
right.
TPF were riot squad. They came,
Right.
they used to go into a neighborhood where there was a problem. They used to beat the daylights out of everybody, crack their skulls, and then leave
Right.
bodies on the street. And then they would go to another neighborhood. Even the regular station house cops resented them because when these guys left, there was a lot of resentment in the neighborhood to the police department. It almost looked like when they left the neighborhood almost looked like what Minnesota looks like today.
Now.
Yeah.
So over there in front of the Soviet mission, we had a couple of riots that were really police riots, but I caught 16 stitches in my head one time over there, being arrested and getting beaten up with billy clubs inside the precinct, inside the 19th precinct.
Wow.
But I
You
was
know what?
involved.
You sound like a real rough kid. And if we ended the interview right here, people would think, well, who is this guy, and who else did he beat up? But the fact of the matter is that you spent your professional life as director of pediatric pulmonary function lab at which hospital was it? Kingsbrook,
Downstate Medical Center.
downstate
Downstate.
medical center. That's quite a switch. Your karate didn't come in exactly handy in that function.
Well, I have to tell you that when I joined the Department of Pediatrics in pulmonary, I had an Indian physician who was the chief of the division. His name was Dr. Rao. And Dr. Rao was a very, very nice man, and he drafted me to come into pediatrics from the Department of Medicine. He wanted me to develop the laboratories. And we worked together. We used to eat lunch in the cafeteria every day. One day while we were sitting there and having a cup of coffee, one of the Jewish doctors who knew me from my life before medicine came over and he said hello. Okay, and then the next day he had occasion to meet with Dr. Rao, and he said to Dr. Rao, that guy you were having coffee with yesterday, do you know who he is? Do you know who that guy is? And he began to tell him my experiences in the JDL, that I was arrested many times and I did this and I did that.
Yeah.
And Dr. Rao, obviously, I didn't go into the hospital, into my position there, bragging about my arrests or bragging about the JDL. That was not a topic for me. Anyway, he asked me, is it true what he said? Were you arrested many times? Is it true? Because he told me all kinds of things. Is it true? And I thought for a moment, why should I lie to him? I had a very nice relationship. I said, yeah, it's true. And I explained to him about the JDL, what we did. And Dr. Rao said something to me that always stuck with me. He said, it's incredible that you spent years being arrested, doing these illegal things, and then you were able to change your life around, go back to school, end up going to medical school, and completely change your attitude and become a normal person who is treating patients and so on and so forth. So he found it interesting that I could make this switch. But the bottom line was that I was in the JDL for 4 years to 72, and I believed very much in doing what I can to protect Jews and teaching classes so Jews could protect themselves. You can imagine that I'm very frustrated today
Yeah.
that we don't
Right.
have groups like the JDL to
Yeah.
do what we did
Yeah.
in the late 60s, that they don't have groups like that today.
I
I'm
want you
very
to.
Absolutely.
frustrated.
So
Big problem.
I want to get to that. You must be very frustrated. We are frustrated. What is missing? Why don't we have that in our community today? Is just one
Well,
person missing? Mayor Kahana is all that's missing?
you know what? First of all, let me say that I write a lot of articles for the Jerusalem Post and Times of Israel and the JNS, and some of them,
And the Five Towns Jewish Times.
and the Five Times Jewish
Of
Times, of
course.
course, but Five Times Jewish Times, I don't remember ever being censored. I could write whatever topic I wanted to write, and you were very gracious and kind, and you never told me, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going to print that, but the JNS does. I was told
Really?
by Jonathan Tobin that if
Right.
you write anything positive about Meir Kahane, I'm not going to publish it.
Really.
Unreal.
Now, if I write something negative about Kahane, he would be delighted to publish it. So I find this to be very, very disappointing that they're silencing a voice in the Jewish community because they don't like that voice, because they don't agree with that voice, that they're silencing us. And, that is obviously, it doesn't sit well. But why we don't have a JDL today, I can tell you that what made the JDL very, very powerful and active, and was Mayor Kahana. Kahana not only had great vision, not only had great ideas, not all of his ideas were great. I don't think that Kahana walked on water, but one thing for sure, he was willing to be at the front of the group, and he was willing to take the blows, and he was willing to take the criticism, and unfortunately, he was willing to get killed. And
Well,
we don't have anybody with that kind of Mesiras Nefesh in this course.
well,
And because nobody is willing to stand up there and say, okay, we're going to start doing this. I need people to help me. Nobody's doing that. There's no leader.
yeah.
I'm not willing to do that.
First of all,
At my
you know,
age, I'm
I
not
want.
doing that.
Yeah, I understand that. Let me make an observation about that. First of all, I don't think anybody ever walks on water. I think it's a big Bubbermeister. Number one.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right.
Number two, years ago, and my wife was with me. I interviewed Nachman Kahana, Meir Kahana's brother,
Sure.
who lives in the old city of Jerusalem. And he told me a lot of things, and I got a couple of stories out of it. But one of the things he said to me was that Meir said to him that he knows he's going to be killed, and he prays that he's not killed by a Jew. That's what he
Right,
was afraid of,
right.
and
You
he was
know,
killed.
when I have a book coming out, hopefully it'll be published by Geffen Books, and it's tentatively titled "The Toughest Jew in Brooklyn."
Okay,
And this book talks about my karate training in Bedford-Stuyvesant and Brownsville, and then talks about my years in the JDL. So last year, I traveled to Yerushalayim, and I looked up Rebbetzin Kahana and
right,
Nachman. Nachman was there with his mother, and we
right,
spoke for about an hour. And Rebbetzin Kahana gave me a beautiful blurb for my upcoming book, which I
right,
appreciated very much. And I am in contact with Nachman. I
yeah,
remember Nachman when we were in the JDL camp in '69,
yeah,
and Nachman was about 12 years old at the time.
yeah,
And I remember that Mayor used to come to the JDL camp every Shabbos. He made it his business to be there because his family was there and he wanted to spend Shabbos with his family. And specifically, he would sit and learn Gemara with Nachman.
yeah.
And I had the pleasure to sit in on those shiurim, and I was able to learn with Meir and with Nachman. And Nachman, we didn't see each other for many, many years, but we have a connection, from those days. So I know that, in fact, my younger son is now studying law at Bar Ilan University. And Nachman met him and invited him for a Shabbos. And one of the things that Nachman specializes in, I think he has a doctorate that he was teaching at Hebrew U, was halacha and how it relates to Israeli civil law. It's a very interesting to put together these two topics. And my son Jonathan is going to be taking a specific course like that at Bar Ilan. So Nachman and him are going to get together beforehand, and he'll help him. And he'll tutor him, or he'll influence him, he'll do something.
Well,
Anyway,
Nachman was older than Meir, wasn't he?
no,
No,
no.
Meir was older.
Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. I
Nachman
made a
was older.
mistake. I'm
Nachman was
sorry.
older.
Yeah.
Nachman was older. I
When we met
mistakenly
him, he
meant.
told us that.
Yeah, it wasn't Nachman. I'm talking about Baruch, Meir's son. I'm
Ah,
sorry. I'm
Ah.
I'm talking about Baruch. I got confused for a
yeah,
moment.
yeah,
Listen, at my age, it's okay
yeah.
for me to get confused once in a
Yes,
while. I was pretty fluid up
that's why
until now.
that's why we have editors to
Right.
make
By
No,
us
the
it
way,
was
Alex,
to make us look good.
there was a podcast on this past Matzah Shabbos, and you were part of it. You were friendly with Ronnie Greenwald.
absolutely,
Okay,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
my son interviewed Ronnie's wife and Ronnie's son,
Okay.
and somehow the subject came up about Alex Sternberg. I don't remember, but you were
talking
one
about tough
of
Jews.
Ronnie's guys.
Yes. Well, when I came to America, Ronnie was a Rebbe in Torres Emes.
Right.
He lived in Borough Park. He was a Rebbe, and I was in his class. And Ronnie used to invite some of us to help him put up his sukkah. I was 11, 12 years old, so we used to go to his house and help him put up his sukkah, etc. As the years passed, I went in the summer months, I went to Camp Mogen Avrom. and Ronnie was the director. It was
Right.
a Federation camp coming out of
Hmm.
the Williamsburg Y,
Right.
actually.
Right.
And there was that camp, and there was a girls' camp called
Camp
Camp
Sternberg,
Sternberg.
where I
Right,
went for 1 year.
right. No relation to me. It was named after a pediatrician in Williamsburg whose name was Dr. Helmut Sternberg.
Uh-huh.
Anyway,
Hmm.
my relationship with Ronnie was ongoing over the years. Like we would see each other every so often. We would run into each other, so we had a good and close relationship. Uh, Ronnie was also involved with Torah Masora, and he got in touch with me and he said, "We want you to go to Israel, and we want you to meet up with this guy who started some kind of a self-defense program called Krav Maga." Well, by that time, I already met this guy. His name
Oh,
was
Krav
Imi
Maga.
Lichtenfeld, who was the founder of this system of martial arts. He was happened to be
Right.
Hungarian. He lived in Netanya, and so I went to meet him in Wingate Sports Institute, and I looked at the program, etc., and we were interested in instituting classes in all the yeshivas. I don't remember. I think there was a Rabbi Kamenetsky who was the head of Torah Masora, maybe.
Yeah,
Uh,
Joe Kamenetsky.
yeah, and somehow or other, we never did establish this program. It would have been wonderful to have every yeshiva, even today.
So
This is
do you think we're missing that today? Physical ability to physically defend oneself in the yeshiva world, is that missing?
for sure. For sure, we're missing kids. First of all, most of the yeshiva kids are not physically fit because the yeshivas don't have a properly organized fitness program.
And they also have very big lunches.
Well, they have big lunches, but basically, physical fitness in many yeshivas is gym. They play basketball,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
those kids that don't play basketball, those kids that are not good in basketball, they don't do anything.
right.
So the yeshivas don't have a program where every kid, skinny, fat, strong, weak, every kid has a program where they go every day and they do push-ups, they do sit-ups, they lift weights, they do things, and they train in some kind of a martial art. I think they should. I would be delighted if I could get invited to a Torah Masora meeting or a yeshiva umbrella group meeting where I could talk to a lot of the Rebbeim and explain to them why this is vital and why this is so important.
Well, listen,
You know,
I could arrange a meeting for you at the head of Torah Masora. I wonder how far that's going to get, but
I would be delighted. It says Ushmartem es nafshoy seichem.
right,
And some of the Rebbeim interpret that pasuk to say, don't smoke cigarettes. But
right.
if that is accurate, then do exercise. Because Ushmartem es nafshoy seichem. You got to do exercise. You have to be able
Take
to
care of your
protect
body.
yourself. Right.
Listen,
So,
Alex, I know you're working on the new book, The Toughest Jew in Brooklyn, but I want to talk about for a few minutes about the book that you have already written, with the intriguing title, and one I think that my wife will be particularly interested in because, number one, her parents are Holocaust survivors as well, like yours. Um,
right,
and came to this country, after the war in '46 or '47. But your book is recipes from Auschwitz.
right. I hope that I'm not disturbing this podcast. I need for a half a second to get the book off the shelf.
Go ahead. Yeah, you're not disturbing us at all. You're not disturbing us at all. That's why
Okay.
we employ editors.
Okay. Well, this is the book,
Okay, recipes of Auschwitz. Recipes from Auschwitz. Esther, what do you
Recipes
think?
from
Esther,
Auschwitz.
what do you think that's about? Having not read it, what's
Well,
your suspicion? What do you think it's about?
there wasn't too much food available there. So, I mean, I could only speak for my father who ended up in Siberia. He had some frozen potatoes.
So my mother used to tell me she was shipped to Auschwitz in 1944, and she was in Auschwitz for several months, and she met up all the Hungarian women. The Hungarian Jews were shipped away in 44, and they were in the camps for 6, 7, 8, 9 months, less than a
Months.
year.
Right.
Yes, but the ladies, when they were working, they used to get together and they used to talk about recipes. Like one lady would get up and she would say, "Well, I make that goulash this way. I put in this, I put in that." And the other ladies would say, "No, no, 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 no. That's not the way. That's not a proper Hungarian goulash. This is the way you're supposed to do it." So because they were hungry, because they were starving, because they didn't have any other recreation, if I could use that word, they used to trade recipes and they used to talk recipes all day. And this was, my mother called this cooking. I said, "What did you do all the time in Auschwitz?" She goes, "We were cooking." And this is the way they cooked. They talked about the tablecloth they were going to put down on their table and the dishes they were going to put and who they were going to invite to this banquet that they were dreaming about. And my mother memorized a lot of the recipes. And when she returned from the camp, she wrote them down and she used to cook from the recipes that she learned from the other Hungarian ladies. And as time passed, she gave me the recipes and she taught me how to cook. And I used to be in the kitchen with my mom and I used to watch her cook and I learned how to cook. And I put together her story and my father's story. They did the Shoah tapes, the Spielberg Shoah tapes. And also, of course, I spoke with them and I did a lot of independent research about the various camps that they were in. And I took many of the recipes and I put them into the book after each chapter, so I'm all our friends. Oh, the first time I did this, I had a kiddush on a Shabbos for my mother's yahrzeit,
Mm-hmm.
and I prepared all of the dishes that I used to learn from my mother. And I invited everybody from the shul to come to the house. I lived about a block away from the shul, and many people came to the house for kiddush. And I explained to them the origin of these dishes, and I said, "Please enjoy the recipes from Auschwitz." And a couple of people said to me, "Well, that's a very interesting title. I mean, it's interesting, it's innovative."
Yeah.
So the title stuck. So I named the book "Recipes from Auschwitz."
So which one? What was your favorite recipe of all the recipes that you came across?
Goulash.
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 Yep. In
What's
Hungarian, it's pronounced goulash,
in
but
Yeah.
in
goulash?
America they pronounce it goulash.
It's meat. It's meat mostly, right?
It's
Meat and
meat and
potatoes.
potatoes and spices.
Meat and potatoes,
It's
spices,
like a
and you have
cholent
to
without barley.
cook it.
Well, a Hungarian cholent does not have potatoes in it.
That's
Uh,
true.
it
A Polish cholent is only potatoes and
Only
meat and
potatoes.
and
right.
soup.
Hungarian cholent has several types of beans, and there is meat in it naturally, and also different spices, but there's no potatoes. But the
Right.
goulash is a combination of,
Potatoes.
you know, right. The origin of goulash in Hungary, they had Hungarian shepherds that were tending sheep. And each day they would get together someplace for lunch. One guy had a piece of meat, the other one had a couple of potatoes, one guy had an urn, they had water, and they had some paprika, and they would get together and they would cook up the goulash, and that was the origin of this dish in Hungary.
Fascinating.
Okay, I know we're jumping all over the place, but I want to cover one more topic before I
The
let.
legend of the Maccabees.
Yeah, I want to talk about the
Okay?
Maccabea Games. You've been involved with that. I read for 40 years.
I think
I
it's more. I think it's more. I got
more than
involved with
forty
that in the
years.
early 70s.
Okay, so what was the nature of your involvement? And I imagine it was all karate related.
Okay. It's 1972. I went to Israel for the first time, and
So
I
did
heard
I.
about these Maccabea games, which I never heard of before.
Yeah,
Obviously, in Torah Vedas, we didn't know about Maccabea games.
right.
And I met a number of karate instructors while I was there. I trained with them in their schools. And when I came back, I looked up the U.S. Maccabee organization, and I knew karate was not involved. And I volunteered that I will lead the effort to put together a karate team and so on. So they said karate
Alex,
is not a sport.
you didn't Google the information. Where'd you find the information? You didn't find it on Google. You have to go to the
No, there was
library.
no Google at the time, but I was told in Israel that there was a Maccabee organization in America, and I don't remember how. It's a good question. I don't remember how, but I did some research. And I
Yeah.
found this organization in the city that had an office, Maccabee Association, and I got in touch with them, and they ultimately named me as chairman of karate. And I
Okay.
started sending out emails, not emails, there was no email. I started sending out
Right.
letters to different countries, South Africa, Canada, Mexico, to different Jewish organizations, and got in touch with the Maccabea group, and we pushed to get karate accepted. And that was the first time karate appeared in the Maccabea Games was in 1977. I coached a team, and I had a good, strong team. And then for every 4 years since that time, I've been at the Maccabea. I'm still chairman of the karate committee. I am actually co-chairman now. A dear friend of mine, who's an Israeli karate guy who has been living in America for many years, Avi Azulai, is co-chairman with me. We have been working on the Maccabea for many years, and so now also we have been bringing teams to Israel for 40, 50 years, and teams of men and women, boys, girls. So it's an incredible experience. You have to remember that a lot of the kids that come to the Maccabea Games have very little connection with Judaism.
Yeah.
They're not religious, and
Yeah.
they have very little connection. And coming to Israel, one boy came to Israel on the Maccabea team. He was a Russian boy. He didn't have a bris. He grew up completely assimilated. He started to come to my house, and he became very friendly with my oldest son, Dov.
Okay.
And after his experience in Israel in the Maccabea, he came back and he got in touch with Rabbi Willowig in the Five Towns,
Okay.
the
Wallowitz.
Lubavitcher
Yeah.
rabbi.
Yeah.
He arranged for himself a pidyon ben. He arranged for himself a bris, and he went back to learn in the yeshiva in Yerushalayim, Aish Torah.
Rachel Torah. Yeah.
Esha Torah. Today he's a rabbi who wears a black hat. He's got kids with payas, and this was really largely as a result of the sport and the Maccabea Games. So the Maccabea is a very interesting. A number of years ago, 5, 6, 7 years ago, the Maccabea held a dinner, and they honored me with something called Legends of the Maccabea for about 40 or 50 years of being involved and working and gathering money and gathering athletes. So I have been very much involved with the Maccabea.
Alex Sternberg, it's been great to speak to you and to just hear the headlines and a little bit of details of a beautiful life lived, an important life lived, and the great contributions you made to Jewish life. So I thank you very much for joining us. And
Larry, I want to thank you very much for inviting me, giving me an opportunity to promote my books and to talk about my favorite topic, I guess, is myself. So
okay,
I have an opportunity to talk about me. I'm also beginning to work on starting a podcast.
okay,
And toward that end, I bought a microphone and so on, but I'm neophyte. I'm not sure. I know that I'd like to talk about political issues a lot. Right now, there's an issue going on in Israel that's roiling the country about the proposed death penalty that
right,
Ben Gvir is promoting in the Knesset.
right.
So I have a lot of opinions
You're
about things like that.
you're
What's
for
your
that.
opinion?
Are you for that? Are you for that?
My opinion is that there were some articles going back and forth. I wrote one in the Jerusalem Post, and there were two, I think they're Reform rabbis that were vehemently against the death
Right,
penalty in general. I think they're against it no matter what. But the death penalty in Israel for these murderers is not to punish them. It's not
right,
because they killed people, but it's
right.
to make sure they don't kill again.
Right.
Right. Well,
Because
Get them off the street.
it's more. It's really more than that. The death penalty. You're right. It's not about killing somebody.
It
It's
should be a
about creating.
deterrent.
it's about creating an environment of a deterrent for others that will think twice about getting involved in killing. Right now, if you kill
Well,
a Jew in Israel, you get the place to stay and your family gets compensated. You get 3 meals a day. And that's not the way to do it. I don't want to start the
the,
3-hour program right now because those guys over
And
okay,
then you get traded.
those guys in the
right.
corner, are getting jumpy. Okay, that's our program for today. Thanks to Alex Sternberg, our guest. We just really touched the headlines of some of the topics, and our co-host Esta, doing a great job once again and keeping us in line and keeping our conversation focused. And I want to thank Dan and David back in the studio in New York. We're coming with you from Florida today. And we hope to be back up there in the cold with you sometime next week.